Hello there, and welcome to the Reddit Slumber. If you're looking for a cozy place to unwind and let your mind wander, you've found it. We're back with another collection of stories to help you gently wind down. As always, if you enjoy our time together, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Pull the covers up, take a deep breath, and let's dive straight into the stories. Story 1. I'm probably going to sound like the bad guy here. I get it. I'm the crazy ex-girlfriend, the one who couldn't let go. That's the easy story, the one he's probably telling her right now. But you don't know him like I do. You don't know the man I built. When I met Liam, he was nice. That's the best word for him. He wore beige sweaters, drank light beer, and thought a wild Friday night was staying up to watch The Late Show. He was living in black and white, and honestly, he seemed perfectly happy with it. But I saw something in his eye. A little flicker of someone who wanted more but was too scared to ask for it. I was the one who brought color into his life. Our relationship wasn't about dates and holding hands. It was an explosion. I pushed him. I challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. He called it toxic and abusive at the end, throwing those words around like they were nothing. But when we were in it, he called it alive. He'd never felt more alive. I taught him how to stop apologizing for existing. I got him to trade his boring sweaters for a leather jacket. I took him to underground clubs, got him into fights he didn't start, and showed him that life wasn't something you plan in a spreadsheet. It was messy and loud and incredible. And yes, our sex life was part of that. It was intense, primal. We filmed it because we wanted to capture that energy. Those videos weren't just sex tapes. They were proof. Proof that this quiet, predictable man could be a force of nature. He loved it. He loved that I took charge, that I wasn't afraid to be aggressive. He was never more himself than he was in those moments with the camera on, completely letting go of the scared little boy he used to be. Then he left. He said he needed peace. He said he needed stability. What he really meant was that he was scared. The fire we started was getting too big for him to handle, so he ran. He ran right into the arms of the safest, most predictable woman he could find. Her. I saw the engagement photos on a mutual friend's social media. There he was, standing in a field of flowers, wearing a light blue button-down shirt, tucked in. He had that same pleasant, empty smile he had when I first met him. And next to him was her. She looked exactly like you'd expect. Pretty simple, smiling like she just won the lottery for a lifetime supply of vanilla ice cream. My first feeling wasn't anger or jealousy. It was pity. Deep, profound pity for him. He had undone all my work. It was like he'd taken the incredible, vibrant masterpiece we had created together and painted over it with a roller and a can of boring off-white paint. He was erasing himself, and she was helping him do it. For a few weeks I tried to ignore it. Let him have his quiet little life. But it ate at me. He was lying to himself, and he was lying to her. She was agreeing to marry a man she'd never truly met. The real Liam, the one who screamed with passion and wasn't afraid to lose control, was buried somewhere deep inside this new, boring version of himself. She deserved to know who she was really getting into bed with for the rest of her life. It wasn't a malicious plan. It was an intervention. An act of honesty. I found her profile easily enough. It was public, of course, full of pictures of lattes, sunsets, and them holding hands. It was a perfect catalog of a boring life. I went through our old files and picked out a few clips. Not the craziest ones, but the ones that showed his face the most. The moments he looked truly free, wild, and completely mine. A highlight reel of the man she thought she knew. I sent them to her in a direct message. My hands were shaking a little, but my head was clear. I knew what I had to do. I attached the clips and wrote a simple, honest message. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Asterisk. You may be marrying him, but you will never be able to satisfy him the way I did. Asterisk. Because she couldn't. You can't just flip a switch and create that kind of chemistry. We forged ours in fire over years of breaking down his walls. She was just decorating the outside of a prison he'd built for himself. Then I sent the same videos to him. Not to be cruel, I did it to remind him. I wanted to shock his system, jolt him out of the beige-colored dream he was living in. I wanted him to see what he was giving up. I wanted him to look at her, then look at the man in those videos, and see the truth. I was giving him one last chance to wake up before he made the biggest mistake of his life. I hit send on both messages and put my phone down on the table. My heart was pounding. This was it. The moment of truth. I expected an explosion. An angry call from him screaming at me. A hysterical, tearful message from her. Something. Anything. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was him, but it wasn't a message. It was just a notification. When I tried to click on his name, his profile was gone. User not found. He'd blocked me. Instantly. No fight, no final words. Just silence. A coward's silence. That's how I knew I'd hit a nerve. He couldn't face it. He couldn't face me. He couldn't face himself. That was his answer. But what about hers? I checked our message thread. The videos were still there. And underneath the last one, there were two little words that made my blood run cold and hot at the same time. Seen. Saying, seen. She's seen them. And since then, nothing. Absolute silence. Her profile is still active. She hasn't blocked me. The message just sits there, a digital bomb I've rolled into her perfect little life. Now all I can do is wait for it to go off. The waiting was the worst part. For 3 days, her silence was a constant noise in my head. I'd pick up my phone, check the message thread, and see those two little words, times, seen asterisk. It felt like she was looking right at me, judging me from behind her screen. I imagined every possible scenario. Her crying her eyes out. Her screaming at Liam, throwing the engagement ring back in his face. I kept refreshing her social media, waiting for the inevitable sad quote or for their smiling couple photos to disappear. Nothing. In fact, it was the opposite. The day after I sent the videos, she posted a picture of them at a farmer's market holding hands over a basket of apples. The caption was sickeningly sweet. Perfect Sunday with my perfect guy. It was a performance. It had to be. No one sees what I sent and just goes to buy apples. She was trying to prove a point to show me she wasn't bothered. But I knew better. The bomb had gone off. She was just pretending she couldn't hear the ringing in her ears. On the 4th day, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. It was her. the fiancé. Standing there on my welcome mat, holding a coffee cup, looking as calm as if she were here to borrow a cup of sugar. My mind raced. Was she here to fight? To scream, I braced myself, opened the door, and leaned against the frame, trying to look bored. "Can I help you?" She gave me a small, sad smile. "I thought we should talk." I almost laughed. "I think the videos did all the talking, don't you?" "They did," she said, her voice even. "That's why I'm here. Can I come in?" Something about her complete lack of fear made me uneasy. I stepped aside and let her in. She stood in the middle of my living room, looking around for a second before turning back to me. She wasn't the meek little thing from her photos. She was composed, steady. So I started crossing my arms. "Now you've seen him. The real him. The man who isn't satisfied with vanilla." She took a slow sip of her coffee. "I did see him," she said. And my first thought wasn't about the sex. It was that I didn't recognize the look in his eyes. "That's because you've never seen him truly alive," I shot back. "No," she said softly, and the word hung in the air between us. "It's because I've never seen him look so scared. I watched those videos and I didn't see a man who was wild and free. I saw a man who was performing. I saw someone desperately trying to keep up, trying to be the person you were demanding he be. It wasn't passion. It was panic." Her words hit me like a slap. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She kept going. "Liam told me all about you. He called your relationship the crucible. He said he thought for a long time that the intensity was love, that the chaos meant he was living. But it wasn't living. It was surviving. He wasn't a masterpiece you created. He was a prisoner of war, and he finally escaped." "He loved it," I whispered, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. "He loved me." She finally showed a flicker of emotion. It was pity. "He was addicted to the drama you created, and you were addicted to having control. What you call love, he now calls trauma. The man I'm marrying isn't a boring, safe version of the one you knew. He's the real version. He's the man he was before you got your hands on him. He's gentle and kind, and for the first time in years, he's peaceful. He's happy." She placed her coffee cup on my table. "I'm not here to fight with you. Honestly, I'm here because I wanted to thank you. You sent me those videos to hurt me, to blow up my life. But all you did was show me exactly what he ran away from. You showed me the ghost he's so relieved to be free of. You confirmed that choosing a quiet life with me was the best decision he ever made." She walked to the door and paused. "He blocked you because he's done. I won't be blocking you because you have no power over me. Goodbye." And then she was gone. I just stood there in the total silence of my apartment, the smell of her coffee still in the air. My whole story, the entire foundation of what I believed had just been demolished in under 5 minutes. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, my hands trembling. It was a message from a number I no longer had saved, but I knew who it was. He'd unblocked me. Just for this. The message was short. Asterisk. She told me she was going to talk to you. I hope now you'll understand. We are happy. Please leave us alone. Asterisk. I tried to reply, to type something, anything, but when I hit send, the message failed. User not found. He was gone again. Forever. I sank onto my couch, the strength gone from my legs. I thought about the videos again, but this time I saw them through her eyes. I saw his face, the strange smile, the sweat on his brow. Was it passion or was it pressure? Was he a force of nature or just a boy trying to impress the girl who scared him? I thought I was planting a seed of truth in their perfect little world. But they had planted a seed of doubt in mine, and it was already taking root. I had pictured myself as a ghost in their bedroom, a constant reminder of a passion they could never recreate. Now I see the truth. I am a ghost. But I'm not a temptation. I'm a haunting. I'm the nightmare he wakes up from relieved to find that he's safe in his quiet, beige, peaceful bed. And he is never, ever coming back.
Story 2.
My brother has always been my hero. I know that sounds like something you'd read in a cheesy book, but for me it's true. When his dad, the man I spent the first 12 years of my life calling my father, found out I wasn't his kid, everything changed. I still remember the look on his face. He looked at me like I was something disgusting he'd found on the bottom of his shoe. And then just like that, I was gone from his life. My mom fell apart, but my brother Michael, who was just a teenager, he stepped up. He was the one who would sneak out to see me, who made sure I knew I wasn't garbage. He was my entire family, the only person who ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. We were a team, Michael and me against the world. He was my protector, my best friend. So when he met Sarah, I really did try to be happy for him. I swear I did. But I saw the shift almost immediately. Suddenly all his stories started with we. We went here, we think this. Our weekly phone calls turned into calls every couple of weeks and then mostly just texts. It felt like I was being slowly phased out. Sarah was always nice to my face, of course. She was the master of polite smiles that never reached her eyes. It felt like she was building a wall around him, brick by brick, and every brick was just another excuse for why he was too busy for me. He was my only family, and she was taking him away. When they bought the big house with the indoor pool, it felt like maybe I was wrong. It felt like an apology, like Michael was saying, "See, you're still a part of my life. Come over whenever you want." My friend Chloe and I were so excited. We planned to spend the whole summer there. It was our little piece of paradise, and for a while it felt like old times. Then she got pregnant, and the world went into lockdown. Suddenly, the open invitation had rules. We had to quarantine for 2 weeks before we could come over because I was a risk to the baby. It was the first time she had ever straight up told me I couldn't see my brother, and she used the pregnancy to do it. The baby wasn't even born yet, and it was already a weapon she was using to push me further away. I felt this cold panic in my chest. If I didn't do something, I was going to lose him completely. After our 2 weeks of isolation, we were finally allowed back. But the vibe in that house was awful. You could feel the tension in the air. Sarah would just sit there watching my every move with one hand constantly resting on her stomach like it was a shield. Michael was always working buried in his laptop, looking stressed and exhausted. He didn't seem happy. He seemed trapped. That's why I brought Chloe. Chloe is fun and bubbly and light. She's everything Sarah wasn't being. I just wanted to bring some energy back into that house, to remind Michael what it was like to laugh, and not feel like he had to be careful with every word he said. And it worked at first. When Chloe would go talk to him while he was working, he would actually look up and smile. She'd tease him about being so serious, and he'd give a sarcastic answer, and for a minute, I could see the old Michael again. That's all I wanted. Of course, Sarah saw it differently. To her, everything was a threat. She'd give Chloe the dirtiest looks. Chloe would walk around in her bikini because, hello, we were there to use the pool. What else was she supposed to wear? But she almost never got in the water. She'd say it was because she wanted to try and pull Michael out of his work fog to get him to talk to someone who wasn't nagging him about baby stuff. Chloe is a very touchy-feely person. She always has been. She'd touch his arm when she was laughing or put a hand on his chest to make a point. It's just how she is. I saw Michael sort of lean away sometimes, but I didn't think he was uncomfortable. I thought he was just being careful. He knew his wife was watching them like a hawk, ready to find something to be mad about. He was trying to keep the peace. I'm not going to lie, I made a few comments myself. I once told Sarah she was getting a little chubby. It was a joke, a sister-in-law jab, you know. She looked at me like I'd just slapped her. Another time I told her a story about my friend whose boyfriend cheated on her after she got super controlling. I was trying to give her a hint like, don't push him away by being so insecure, but she twisted my words. She told Michael I was trying to scare her. Every single thing I did was misinterpreted as an attack. I was just trying to run a little test. I wanted to show my brother that this perfect little life he was building was actually really fragile. I wanted him to see that his wife's insecurity was the real problem, not me and not Chloe. For 2 weeks, we went over every day. The tension got thicker and thicker. Sarah stopped talking to me completely. She would just give me these cold, silent glares from across the room. Chloe kept trying to be friendly, but even she was getting tired of the drama. Yesterday was the worst. We were about to leave, and Chloe went to say goodbye to Michael. She gave him a quick hug, and he hugged her back for a second before letting go. It was nothing. But when I looked over at Sarah, her face was white with rage. She didn't say a word, just stood up and walked out of the room. As Chloe and I were walking to my car, I glanced back through the big glass windows. I could see Michael and Sarah in the kitchen. He was running his hands through his hair, looking stressed, and she was talking with her hands looking furious. She was crying. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I knew it was about us. I felt a sick feeling in my stomach, but also a tiny spark of something else. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally seeing it. He was finally seeing how crazy and controlling she was being. I got in the car and all I could think was, now he has to make a choice. The drive home was quiet. Chloe kept looking over at me, probably waiting for me to say something, but my mind was racing. I replayed the scene at the window over and over again, Sarah with her fake tears and dramatic gestures. Michael looking torn. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. He had to see it. He had to see how manipulative she was being, turning a simple goodbye hug into a full-blown drama. This was it. This was the moment he would realize he was in a cage. She's a psycho, Chloe finally said, breaking the silence. Seriously. I was just being nice. I know, I said, my voice tight. But maybe this is good. Maybe he finally sees it. Chloe didn't look convinced. I don't know, girl. He looked pretty stressed. And guys always side with the pregnant wife. Not Michael, I said, trying to convince myself more than her. He's different. He knows me. He knows I would never do anything to actually hurt him. When I dropped Chloe off, she gave me a look. Just be careful, okay? Don't push too hard. I spent the rest of the night staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. I imagined what I would say. I'd be calm and reasonable. I'd tell him I was worried about him, that Sarah's jealousy wasn't healthy for him or the baby. I wouldn't even mention Chloe. I would make it all about my concern for him, my brother. My phone finally buzzed late the next morning. It was him. My heart jumped. I took a deep breath and answered, trying to sound casual. "Hey, you." His voice was ice. "Chloe can't come over anymore." It wasn't a request. It wasn't a discussion. It was a command. All the air went out of my lungs. It wasn't his voice. It was hers. She was speaking through him. The calm, reasonable plan I had rehearsed in my head evaporated. She had won. After everything, after all those years of him promising to be there for me, he was choosing her. He was throwing me away just like his dad threw me away. What I stammered. Why, she didn't do anything wrong. "It's making Sarah uncomfortable," he said, his voice flat and detached. "It's done. Just don't bring her back to the house." That's when I snapped. All the fear and pain and rage that I'd been swallowing for months just came pouring out. Uncomfortable times. She's times uncomfortable. Of course she is. She's the most insecure, controlling person I have ever met, and you're just letting her do this. "Stop it," he warned. "Don't talk about my wife like that." "Your wife," I laughed, but it was a broken, ugly sound. "She's turned you into her little puppet. You can't even see it. She's using that pregnancy to control every part of your life. She's turned into a miserable beach whale, and she wants everyone else to be as miserable as she is." "You're done," he said, his voice dangerously low. "We're done talking." "No, you're going to listen to me." I was screaming now, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't stop the words. They were horrible, but they felt like the only weapons I had left. "She baby-trapped you. You were happy before her, and you know it. This wasn't your plan. You never wanted this suffocating life. She got pregnant on purpose to lock you down for good." There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I should have stopped. I knew I should have stopped. But the terror of him hanging up, of him leaving me completely, was so overwhelming that I just kept going, throwing out the most hurtful thing I could think of. "That baby is already ruining everything," I sobbed. "It's the reason you're miserable. It's the reason you're letting her push me away. You should have dragged her to the abortion clinic when you had the chance." The silence that followed was worse than his yelling. It was absolute, empty. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Don't ever call me again. You are not welcome in my house. You are not a part of my family anymore." He hung up. I just stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My whole body was shaking. The acidic words I'd spat were still burning in my throat. I didn't mean them. Not really. They came from a place of pure animal panic. I was watching my whole world, my only family, get locked behind a door, and I was just clawing at it, screaming anything to make him turn around. I immediately called back. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I started texting. Asterisk, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I was just upset. Asterisk, asterisk, Michael, please. Don't do this. Asterisk, asterisk, I'm scared. Please don't leave me alone. Asterisk, asterisk, she's turning you against me. Can't you see, asterisk, asterisk, I love you, you're my brother. My hero? No response. The messages were delivered, but he never read them. The 2 blue check marks never appeared. He had blocked me. The next few days were a blur. I barely ate. I couldn't sleep. I felt like that 12-year-old girl all over again, sitting on the curb with a suitcase, watching my life drive away without me. My hero, the one person who swore he would always protect me, had just done the one thing he promised he never would. He abandoned me. And for what? For her. For the woman who had methodically and expertly cut me out of his life. And for the baby that was the final nail in my coffin. She had won. She had taken my brother, my family, my entire sense of safety in the world, and she had destroyed it. I wasn't just losing my brother. I was losing my past and my future all at once. I am completely and utterly alone now. And I don't know how to come back from that. I'm right back where I started, the unwanted kid on the outside looking in at a happy family that isn't mine.
Story 3.
Look, I get it. I'm the monster of the story. The guy with no heart who fired a kid while his dad was on his deathbed. I've heard it all. But you've only heard his side. You heard the story from the guy who thinks rules are for other people. You haven't heard it from the one person who was actually trying to keep the whole damn ship from sinking. My name isn't Sergeant A-hole, but that's what they called me behind my back. I earned the sergeant part in the Army, and it's the only part I care about. In the service, you learn a very simple truth procedure is what separates a functioning unit from a pile of bodies. You follow the chain of command. You file the right paperwork. You do things by the book every single time. Not because you like it, but because the one time you cut a corner is the one time everything goes to hell and people get hurt. When I left the military and went corporate, I was shocked. No one seemed to understand this. They thought rules were suggestions. They thought company policy was a joke. Our company, a short-term lender, operated in a legal gray area the size of Texas. We needed to be perfect. Every I dotted, every ant crossed. One mistake, one sloppy report, and we could get sued into oblivion. I was head of compliance and operations. My job wasn't to be popular, it was to protect the company and everyone's paycheck. Then they hired him. My boss. The guy everyone called Awesome Boss. I was up for that job. I had the experience, the discipline. But the execs chose him. He was a people pleaser. All handshakes and big smiles. He'd approve things with a nod in the hallway and forget about them 5 minutes later. He managed by vibes, not by policy. He was a walking, talking liability, and from day one I started a file on him. Not because I was after his job, but because when his sloppy management finally blew up, I needed a record to show I tried to stop it. Then Awesome Boss hired the OP, the kid. Right out of some fancy school with a degree that he thought made him the smartest guy in the room. He was sharp, I'll give him that. But he had that classic rookie arrogance. He thought the rules didn't apply to him. He'd roll in 10 minutes late, leave 15 minutes early. Small things, yeah, but they show a mindset. They show a guy who thinks he's special. Soon enough, he started making waves. He worked in partner relations, a job that was basically about keeping our referral partners happy. Instead, he started digging into our loan agreements. He'd come to me with concerns. He called our practices predatory. I sat him down and tried to explain how the world works. Look, kid, I told him, our legal team, which costs more per hour than you make in a month, has approved every single one of these products. Our business is high risk, high reward. That's the model. Your job is to do your job, not to relitigate the company's entire legal strategy. He just looked at me with this self-righteous smirk. He and Awesome Boss were a perfect match, two guys who thought their feelings were more important than the multi-million-dollar machine that paid their salaries. He was creating a paper trail of dissent, and I documented every single conversation. The day it all went wrong, the kid got a call. His dad was dying. It's a terrible thing. I'm not a monster. I felt for him. But a personal tragedy doesn't suspend reality. There is a procedure for emergency family leave. You fill out a form. You get a signature from your manager. You submit it to HR. It takes 5 minutes and it protects everyone. It protects the employee by officially documenting their leave, and it protects the company by showing we followed the law. What did the kid do? He ran to Awesome Boss's office in a panic. And what did Awesome Boss do? He clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Go. Just go. Don't worry about anything here. No paperwork. No email. No call to HR. Nothing." One of our employees just vanished from the building in the middle of the workday. From a compliance standpoint, this was a 5-alarm fire. What if he got in a car crash on the way? Is he on the clock? Off the clock? Who is liable? Without a paper trail, the company was completely exposed. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a catastrophic failure of management. It was proof that Awesome Boss was unfit for his position. I did my duty. I took my file months of documented procedural violations, culminating in this latest disaster, and I went straight to the COO. I laid it all out. This wasn't me being petty. This was me, the guy in charge of safety and compliance, reporting a critical vulnerability that threatened the entire company. The COO saw it immediately. He wasn't happy, but he knew I was right. Awesome Boss was fired the next day. They asked me to step in as interim head to restore order. My first official act was to deal with the source of the problem. A week later, the kid walked back into the office. He looked tired and sad, but he walked in like he was expecting a welcome home party. I asked him to come to my office. I had an HR rep there as required by policy. I kept it simple and clean. You were absent from work for 5 consecutive days without approved leave, I said. This is a direct violation of company policy and constitutes job abandonment. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. He just stared at me, his mouth open. He started talking about his dad, about his conversation with Awesome Boss. I stopped him. Your personal situation is unfortunate, I told him, but it does not change the facts. A verbal conversation that was never documented has no standing. You abandoned your post. The HR rep started to talk about a severance package, but I cut her off. No severance, I said. This is a termination for cause. Paying him would be admitting the company did something wrong. We did nothing wrong. He broke the rules. He is owed nothing. It was by the book. It was fair. I had neutralized a liability and fixed a broken process. For a few months, it actually worked. The department ran like a well-oiled machine. Morale was low, sure. People called me a robot. They hated the new paperwork. But we were compliant. We were safe. I thought I had cut out the cancer and saved the patient. I thought the problem was solved. I was wrong. The problem wasn't a couple of rogue employees. The problem was so much bigger. I was sitting at my desk one Tuesday afternoon, reviewing quarterly compliance reports, when an email landed in my inbox. It was from a sender I didn't recognize, a .gov address. The subject line was chilling. Official Inquiry, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I stared at the screen, my heart hammering a steady, disciplined rhythm against my ribs. A soldier doesn't panic. A soldier assesses the threat. The CFPB, this was the big leagues. This was the regulatory nuke everyone in our industry has nightmares about. My first thought wasn't fear. It was a cold, sharp sense of validation. Asterisk. This times is why I was so hard on everyone. Asterisk. This times is why paperwork mattered. I stood up, walked to my filing cabinet, and pulled out my folders. Everything was there, my reports on Awesome Boss's procedural screw-ups, my documented conversations with the OP about his concerns, the pristine HR file on his for-cause termination. We were ready. My department was a fortress. I went straight to the COO's office files in hand. "We have an inbound threat," I said, placing the folder on his desk. "But my house is in order. We can fight this." He didn't even look at my files. He just looked tired. "Cooperate fully, Sergeant," he said, using the name he knew I preferred. "But run everything through, legal. Everything." It was the first red flag. He wasn't acting like a commander preparing for battle. He was acting like a man looking for cover. A week later, they arrived. 2 auditors from the Bureau, a man and a woman, both looking like they'd been born wearing gray suits. They weren't interested in my perfect time-tracking sheets or the new multi-step approval process I'd implemented for emergency leave. They pulled out a binder of their own, thick with printed emails and memos. "We have a whistleblower statement," the woman said, her voice flat. "From a former employee. It alleges the company knowingly engaged in predatory lending practices and that management actively suppressed internal complaints." It all clicked into place. The kid. An awesome boss. They hadn't just gotten mad. They had gone to war. They had taken their half-baked ignorant theories about our business and gift-wrapped them for the federal government. "Can you confirm you were this employee's direct manager at the time of his termination?" she asked. "For a short period, yes," I said, my voice steady. "I took over after his previous manager was terminated for gross negligence. I thought this would score a point. It didn't." The man slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of one of my own reports to the COO. My handwriting was in the margins. He pointed to a line where I'd summarized the OP's complaints. "So you were aware of his concerns?" "Of course," I said. He was a junior employee in a non-legal role who thought he knew better than our entire legal department. I documented his unsubstantiated claims and filed them per procedure. It was my job to note his dissent and keep an eye on him as potential internal risk. They just looked at each other. In that moment, I realized we were speaking different languages. I was showing them how I'd identified and contained a threat to the company. They were looking at a manager who had been told about a potential crime and had done nothing but file a memo. My attempts to protect the company were being twisted into a cover-up. The OP hadn't just given them documents. He'd given them a story. And in his story, I was the villain who silenced the hero. The investigation was a nightmare. They interviewed everyone. The narrative that emerged was exactly what the kid and his old boss wanted. Awesome Boss was the cool manager who listened. The OP was the brave young kid who spoke truth to power. And I was the company man, the hatchet man who got rid of them both to protect the company's dirty secrets. My meticulous records, my files, my proof it all just became evidence against me. The fines came down a month later. They were astronomical. The number had so many zeros I couldn't even process it. We were ordered to stop offering half our products. The company was crippled overnight. The panic in the executive suite was like a physical thing you could taste in the air. I was called into the CEO's office. The COO was there too. They didn't offer me a seat. "We have to make some changes," the CEO started. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "The board is demanding accountability." The COO cleared his throat. The final report from the Bureau cites a failure to properly escalate employee complaints at the management level. They're pointing a finger directly at your department. My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? I escalated times everything times to you." I looked directly at the COO. My reports on the OP, his concerns, my warnings that he and Awesome Boss were liabilities. You got all of it. I have copies. You read them. You promoted me because of them. The CEO stepped forward, his face a mask of disappointment. Your reports focused on minor infractions, Sergeant. Tardiness, unapproved leave. You buried the lead. You had an employee raising serious legal flags, and your response was to discipline him for job abandonment. It looks like you were trying to shut him up. I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was a lie. A clean, simple, devastating lie. They were taking my own discipline, my own adherence to the rules, and using it as the murder weapon. They were the ones who had approved the loans. They were the ones who had been copied on every legal review. But I was the one who had documented the problem employee. I had handed them the perfect scapegoat on a silver platter, me. "That's not true," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "We're terminating your employment," the COO said, refusing to meet my eyes. "The official reason will be failure to report critical employee complaints to the executive team." I was fired for not reporting the very things I had spent a year reporting. I was being punished for being the only one who actually did his job by the book. I just nodded. There was nothing else to do. I didn't fight. A soldier knows when the battle is lost. I packed up my desk that afternoon. The people who had called me a robot wouldn't even look at me. To them, it all made sense. The monster got what he deserved. I learned the biggest lesson of my life in that office. I thought the system was the company handbook, the chain of command, the procedures. I was wrong. That's just the fake system they create to keep people like me in line. The real system has only one rule: protect the men at the top. I was loyal to the rules, to the process, to what I thought was the company. And when the time came, the men at the top, to save their own skins, flushed me down the toilet with the rest of the evidence. I was the proof of their guilt, so I had to disappear. The OP probably thinks he's a hero. And maybe in the end he was. He and Awesome Boss burned the whole thing down. But I was the one who was loyal. I was the one who tried to keep the ship afloat. And for my loyalty, I got a pink slip. They needed a turd to sink to the bottom and take the blame with it. I was it. I was the turd that sank.
Story 4.
I know you've probably heard their side of the story. I'm the crazy neighbor, the Karen, who freaked out over a little noise. That's the simple version, the one that makes them the victims and me the monster. But they don't tell you about the silence. They don't tell you what that car really stole from me. Before all this, my life was measured in minutes of quiet. My son, my beautiful little boy Leo, was born with colic and a hate for sleeping that felt personal. Getting him down for a nap wasn't just a task. It was a mission. It was a delicate hour-long dance of rocking, shushing, and walking endless circles around our living room until his tiny body finally went limp in my arms. When I laid him in his crib, I'd hold my breath, tiptoeing out of the room like a bomb disposal expert. The click of the door latch felt like a gunshot. Those moments when he finally slept, that was my oxygen. An hour, maybe 2 if I was lucky, to shower, to eat something that wasn't a granola bar, to just sit and not be touched. To feel like a human being again. We bought this house specifically because the street was a dead end. It was quiet. It was my sanctuary. That silence was everything to me. It was the only thing keeping me from completely falling apart. Then they showed up. Well, the car did. It was some kind of old muscle car, the kind that looks like it runs on pure anger. And the sound, it wasn't just loud. It was a physical thing. A deep guttural roar that vibrated through our windows and up through the floorboards. The first time it started, I nearly dropped a plate. It coughed and sputtered to life like a dragon waking up, and then it settled into this ground-shaking idle. And it was every single day. Right around 2 in the afternoon. Nap time. The first day, Leo's eyes shot open. The second, the engine turned over. He went from sound asleep to screaming red-faced panic in a heartbeat. All my work gone. It took another hour to calm him down. The next day, the same thing happened. The roar, the jolt, the screaming. My peace was shattered. My baby was constantly miserable and overtired. And I was starting to feel a different kind of tired. The kind that sits behind your eyes and makes the world feel fuzzy and wrong. A frantic, buzzing kind of exhaustion. After the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. I saw the younger one, the one learning to drive, standing by the car. I took a deep breath, put on a friendly neighbor smile, and walked over. My heart was pounding. I hate confrontation. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm Karen from next door. I just wanted to ask." Mind trying to keep it down a bit. I have a newborn and he doesn't really seem to like it that much. I tried to make it a joke, a light little thing between neighbors. He gave me this lazy half-smile. "Yeah, sure," he said. But he wasn't really looking at me. His eyes were on the car like he was a teenager with his first crush. He didn't get it. He didn't hear the desperation in my voice. To him, I was just making a polite request. To me, I was begging for my sanity. Nothing changed. Maybe the lessons were 5 minutes shorter, but the noise was the same. The daily explosion that ripped through my house and tore my baby from his sleep. 2 days later, it happened again. The engine roared and Leo started screaming, and something inside me just snapped. I didn't even put on shoes. I marched right out there, my hands shaking. This time I wasn't smiling. "I thought I told you to keep it down," I said. My voice was tight. The guy just shrugged. He had the nerve to look annoyed with me. "It's just how the car is," he said. "It's loud when it starts. It's a waste of gas to turn it off and on while we're practicing." A waste of gas. He said that to my face. He was telling me that a few dollars worth of gasoline was more important than my child sleeping, that his hobby was more important than my well-being. He looked right through me like I was an insect buzzing in his ear. Like I was the one being unreasonable. I just turned around and walked back inside. I didn't say another word. That night was the worst yet. Leo was so overtired he wouldn't settle at all. He just cried and cried. My husband tried to help, but the baby just wanted me. And all I could hear, even in the dead of night, was the phantom echo of that engine. It was burned into my brain. I felt like I was under siege in my own home. Around 3 a.m., I was standing at the window rocking Leo, and I saw it. The car. It was just sitting there in their driveway under the moonlight. It looked so smug, so arrogant. It wasn't just a car anymore. It was a monument to their selfishness. A big ugly symbol of how little they cared about me or my baby. It was the reason I hadn't slept more than 2 consecutive hours in a week. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. I put Leo back in his crib, praying he wouldn't wake up. I grabbed my house keys from the bowl by the door, walked outside into the cold night air, and crossed the lawn. My bare feet didn't even feel the wet grass. My world had shrunk down to that shiny, dark metal beast. I pulled out my longest key and dragged it down the driver's side door. The screech it made was ugly, but it felt good. It was a sound I was in control of. I gave the car a long, deep scar for every hour of sleep it had stolen from me, for every scream my baby had let out. Then I knelt down by the front tire. I jammed the tip of the key into the rubber, pushing with all my weight, until I felt a pop. A quiet hiss filled the air. The sound of release. The sound of pressure escaping. Finally, silence. I walked back inside, my bare feet cold on the kitchen tile, and locked the door behind me. I didn't feel guilty. I felt calm. For the first time in days, the frantic buzzing behind my eyes had stopped. I went upstairs and looked into the crib. Leo was still sound asleep, his little chest rising and falling in a perfect, peaceful rhythm. I had protected that. I had won. I knew they would come. I sat in the dark living room just waiting. I figured it would be in the morning when they found the damage. But I guess they heard the hiss of the tire. The pounding on my front door started about 10 minutes later. It wasn't a knock. It was an angry, frantic banging that shook the whole frame. "Hey, get out here!" It was the older one, the brother-in-law. His voice was muffled but full of rage. I didn't move from the couch. My heart was starting to beat a little faster now, but it was a cold, steady rhythm. This was the fight I knew was coming. "We know it was you. What the hell is wrong with you?" I heard the younger one's voice join in, just as angry. They were shouting, swearing. I took a deep breath, walked to the door, but didn't open it. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood. "I'm not apologizing," I said, my voice clear and loud enough for them to hear. That's when it really started, the insults. "You crazy bitch," one of them yelled. "You're a psycho." The other one called me a stupid bimbo. It was ugly, vile. And in a weird way, it made me feel even more right. This is who they were. This was the kind of person who didn't care about a screaming baby who thought a waste of gas was a good reason to terrorize a neighbor. They were aggressive, entitled hicks who only understood force. Well, I had given them force. "We're calling the cops," the brother-in-law screamed. "Go ahead," I said, back through the door. Then I walked away and went back upstairs to sit in the rocking chair in Leo's room, just watching him sleep. About 20 minutes later, there was a new knock on the door. This one was more official. Firm, but not unhinged. I looked out the window and saw the flashing blue and red lights painting my lawn. My stomach twisted, but I held my ground. I went to the door again. "Who is it?" "Ma'am, it's the police. We need you to come outside and speak with us." I cracked the door just enough to see an officer standing there, but kept the chain on. "I'm not coming outside," I said. "This is my home. My baby is sleeping upstairs." The officer looked tired. "Ma'am, your neighbors are alleging that you vandalized their vehicle. We just need to get your side of the story." My side of the story is that they have been harassing me and my infant son for a week with a car that sounds like a jet engine. I asked them to stop. They refused. I am the victim here. They've been terrorizing me in my own home. He sighed. That may be, but right now we're investigating a crime. You destroying their property isn't the way to handle it. Now please come outside so we can sort this out. Sort this out. They wanted me to go out there in the middle of the night in my pajamas and stand on my lawn next to the two men who had just been screaming obscenities at me to leave my sleeping baby alone in the house. No! This was my safe place. I wasn't leaving it. "I know my rights," I told him. "You can't make me leave my house without a warrant." He just stared at me for a long moment. "Ma'am, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." I just closed the door and locked it. I heard him talking on his radio. I heard my neighbors yelling in the background, telling him I was crazy. They were painting their picture of me, and the police were buying it. The crazy Karen. The hysterical new mom. No one was listening to my side. No one cared about the days of noise, the sleep deprivation, the feeling of being trapped by a sound you can't escape. All they saw was a keyed car and a popped tire. They eventually left. The flashing lights disappeared and the street went quiet again. But it wasn't a peaceful quiet anymore. It was heavy, threatening. The next few days were a blur. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then it did. An officer came to my door with a piece of paper. A warrant for my arrest for destruction of property. They were actually charging me. They were treating me like a common criminal. I had to call my husband at work, completely humiliated, and explain that he needed to come home because I was about to be arrested. But that wasn't the end of it. A week later, another man came to the door and served me with papers. A lawsuit. They were suing me for the damage to the car, for emotional distress, for everything they could think of. They want $60,000. $60,000. That's more than our down payment on this house. It's my son's college fund. It's everything. They want to ruin us. They get to tell everyone they're the victims. They were just two guys having some fun with a car and their crazy neighbor snapped for no reason. But they don't tell you about the screaming baby. They don't tell you about the mother who was so tired she could barely think straight. They don't tell you how it feels when you beg someone for a little consideration and they look at you like you're nothing. They pushed me and pushed me until I broke. And now they're going to make me pay for it. All because I asked for a little bit of quiet. A little bit of human decency in the one place I was supposed to feel safe. They see a keyed car. I see the scar I had to give them just to make them finally listen.
Story 5.
I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. My daughter, my own child, has turned her back on our family and is trying to make me out to be some kind of monster. She's poisoned people against me, and I just need someone, anyone, to hear my side of the story. My husband and I have always built our lives on faith and family. We don't have much in the way of money, I'll be the first to admit that. We live a simple life, but we are rich in the ways that truly matter. God has blessed us with 5 beautiful, healthy children, each one of them a gift. My life's work isn't in some office building. It's right here in my home, in the noise and the chaos and the love that fills these walls. Yes, we've had hard times. We've had to ask for help from family, and they've given it because that's what family does. We are a unit. We rise and fall together. When one part of the body is weak, the other parts support it. That's how it's supposed to be. My daughter, my second oldest, was always so bright. We were so proud when she got into college following her older brother. But I started to see a change in her. College these days, it fills young people's heads with such selfish ideas. It's all about your career, your goals, your independence. They teach you to put yourself first above everyone and everything. She started talking about her 5-year plan and her future, as if her future wasn't completely tied to ours. It was my money this, and my life that. It started to scare me. I saw her drifting away from the values we raised her with, the values of family and sacrifice. A few months ago, God gave us the most wonderful surprise. I'm pregnant. At my age, it's a true miracle, a sign that we are still walking the path He laid out for us. I felt this incredible peace and joy. My husband and I knew it would be a challenge, but we also knew it was a blessing we had to accept. We decided to tell the children all together. We gathered them in the living room, and I could barely contain my excitement. I looked at all their faces, these children we had raised, and I was so ready for them to share in this joy with us. I said the words, "We're going to have another baby." 4 of my children were happy, or at least they were trying to be. But my daughter, her face just crumpled into this mask of pure disgust. Before anyone else could even speak, she just exploded. "Are you kidding me?" she yelled. She called us irresponsible. She started screaming about money, about how we could barely afford the kids we already had, how we were always asking relatives for help. She threw everything in our faces, making our struggles sound like crimes. My husband tried to calm her down. He's a good man, a patient man. He tried to explain that we would make it work just like we always have. He said we are a family and we would all pitch in, and then he brought up the college fund. It was money left to her by her great-uncle, my uncle. He was a man who loved family more than anything. My husband reminded her that the money was there and that it was for family. He just asked her gently if she would consider using it to help us prepare for the new baby. He wasn't demanding it. He was asking her to be a part of this, to invest in her new brother or sister, to show that she was still a part of this family, this unit. Her answer was, hell no. She said it was her money for her future and we had no right to it. That hurt, but what she said next, that's what broke me. She looked right at me. Her eyes were so cold, and she said, "You should just get an abortion." An abortion. She told me to kill my child, her own sibling. The room went silent. I couldn't breathe. In that moment, the girl I had raised was gone, and in her place was a stranger. A cold, cruel person who would suggest I murder my own baby to protect her bank account. I started crying. I couldn't help it. My husband told her she had crossed a line, a terrible line, but the damage was done. I saw what the world had turned my daughter into. She stormed out of the room, and I just sat there, my hand on my stomach, trying to protect the little life inside me from the hate that had just been thrown at it. I thought that was the worst it could get. I prayed that she would come to her senses, that she would come and apologize. But the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Later that night, my phone started ringing. Then my husband's phone rang. It was family. And they didn't sound happy. My daughter wasn't just angry. She was starting a war. She had called my cousin, my first cousins, telling them her side of the story, twisting our words, making us sound like greedy monsters. They wanted to talk. They were on their way over. It wasn't to congratulate us. It was an ambush. And my own daughter was the one leading the charge. I barely had time to wipe my tears before the doorbell rang. My husband went to answer it, and I stood there in the living room, my hands still on my stomach, feeling like a cornered animal. My cousin Sarah walked in first. I love Sarah, I truly do, but she chose a different path in life. A career travel, no husband, no children. She could never understand the joy I feel, the purpose. Behind her came my other cousins, Mark and his wife Karen. Mark's an accountant. And behind them all, standing in the doorway like she was afraid to come in, was my daughter. They didn't come in to hug me or ask how I was feeling. They came in with grim faces like they were here to deliver bad news, not receive good news. They sat on the couch opposite me and my husband, and the air was thick and cold. My daughter wouldn't look at me. She just stared at a spot on the carpet. Sarah started. She spoke in that soft, gentle voice she uses when she thinks she's being sensitive, but it just sounds condescending. She said they were concerned. Concerned about us, about the other children, about the new baby's quality of life. Quality of life. My children have a life filled with love and faith. What more quality do they need? She talked about how much we struggle already. How it wasn't fair to bring another child into that. I just looked at her and thought, how can a woman who has never felt a baby kick inside her dare to tell me what's fair for my child? Then Mark pulled out a folder. A folder. He started talking about our finances, about inflation, about the future cost of college. He had spreadsheets and numbers trying to prove with math that my baby shouldn't exist. My husband tried to argue to explain that God always provides, that our faith is stronger than any financial hardship. Mark just shook his head and said, "Faith doesn't pay the bills." I felt my blood run hot. To sit in my own home and listen to my family tell me that my child, this miracle inside of me, was a bad investment. An entry on a balance sheet. All this time, my daughter said nothing. She just sat there, letting them be her voice, her attack dogs. I finally looked right at her. "Is this what you wanted?" I asked her. "To have our family come here and lecture us? To tell me my baby is a mistake?" Her eyes finally met mine, and they were full of tears, but not of sadness. They were tears of anger. "Someone had to make you see reason," she whispered. "You won't listen to me." "Reason," I said, and my voice started to shake. "You call telling me to kill my child. Reason." The room went quiet again. My cousins looked uncomfortable. Maybe they hadn't known she'd said that. But the damage was done. The line had been crossed. This wasn't a discussion. It was a judgment. They had all decided we were wrong, that our faith was foolish, and that our baby was a burden. My husband stood up. He told them calmly but firmly that this was our decision, our blessing, and our home. I told Sarah and Mark that if they couldn't be happy for us, they could leave. I had to protect myself and the little life I was carrying from all their negativity. They left, and my daughter went with them without another word. The house felt so empty and cold after they were gone. My other kids were hiding in their rooms. They'd heard the yelling. The joy I had felt was gone, replaced by a deep, aching hurt. My own family had turned on me, led by my own child. A few days later, I came home from a doctor's appointment to find my daughter packing boxes in her room. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just cold, blank. I asked her what she was doing. "I'm moving out," she said, not looking at me. "I'm going to stay with a friend." "You're leaving?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You're abandoning your family, your brothers and sisters." She finally turned to me. "I can't stay here," she said. "I can't watch you do this. And I can't listen to you talk about this baby like it's a blessing when all I see is how much everyone is going to suffer." "You see suffering because you only see money," I told her. "You don't see love. You don't see family. We didn't want your money for us. We wanted you to be a part of this family, to share in our blessing. But you made your choice." "Yeah, I did," she said. She picked up a box and pushed past me. She didn't hug me. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked out the door, out of our home and out of our lives. I haven't heard from her since. She won't answer my calls or my husband's. She's cut us off completely. So now here I am. I'm pregnant with a beautiful new baby on the way, a gift from God. And I'm mourning the loss of a daughter. She chose her college fund, her future, and a friend's basement over her own flesh and blood. She was poisoned by a world that teaches you that your own happiness is the most important thing. She can't see that true happiness comes from sacrifice, from being part of something bigger than yourself. I spend my nights praying for her. I pray that God softens her heart and opens her eyes to the truth. We didn't ask her for much. We just asked her to be a sister, to be a daughter, to be family. But to her it was too high a price to pay. And I'm left to wonder how a child I poured all my love into could grow up to be so heartless.
Story 6.
Okay, I know people are going to judge me, but you weren't there. You didn't see how it was between us for 2 years. He wasn't just my boss. Anyone who worked in that office could tell you that. He was the sun the rest of us orbited around, and I was the closest planet. He made a boring job fun. He remembered little things like how I took my coffee or that I was stressed about my exams. He saw me. We had this thing, our own private language almost. Inside jokes from meetings, looks across the room that said more than words ever could. And the emails. He'd send me work, and at the bottom it would say, "Thanks, my love." My heart would just stop for a second every time. I know, he was a bit old-fashioned and said it to some of the much older women in the office too. But it was different with me. You don't say that to a two-year-old girl, your direct report, unless there's something there. It felt like a secret, a little piece of affection just for me hidden in a work email. Then there was her. His fiancée. The one from the perfect Instagram photos. The ready-made family she brought with her. At work he'd talk about her, but it was like he was reading from a script. She's amazing. The kids are great. It never sounded real. It sounded like something he had to say. A few times she came by the office to meet him for lunch, and it was just awkward. She would stand by his desk, not really talking to anyone, just holding his hand like she was afraid he'd disappear. She didn't get him. She didn't see the funny, charming, brilliant man we all saw every day. She just saw the provider, the guy who was supposed to come home and play house. I felt bad for him. He was trapped, and I think he knew it. His farewell party was everything. It was the last chance for something to happen, for him to show me that what we had was real and not just in my head. He told me he'd begged her to come, and when she did, I could see why. He had to keep up appearances. She showed up in this plain dress, looking completely lost among all of his work friends. I watched them all night. He was playing the part of the perfect fiancé, one hand on her back, laughing at her quiet jokes. It looked like hard work, but every few minutes his eyes would find mine. He'd be in the middle of a conversation with someone else, but he'd look over at me and give a little smile. It was like he was saying, "Help me. This is so boring." I knew what he meant. So I went over to their table. I had to save him. "Hey guys," I said, all bubbly and fun. I sat down and started telling a story about a stupid thing that happened at work last week. He lit up. He was laughing for real now, not the polite little laugh he was giving her. I was leaning in, playing with my hair, just being myself. Being the person I knew he actually liked. He was drinking a lot more than I'd ever seen him drink before. People kept bringing him drinks, and he was just downing them. I thought, good. He needs this. He needs to let go of the pressure. I went to the bar. 3 shots of tequila, please. I brought them back to the table. To the best boss ever, I said, handing one to him and one to her. He drank his right away. She just stared at hers for a minute before taking a tiny, disgusted sip. See, she didn't get it. She didn't want him to have fun. A little while later, she stood up and said she was going home. The relief was so obvious. He did his duty, walked her out to her taxi, and gave her a kiss. But when he came back inside, he was a different person. The real him was back. The party kicked into high gear. We were all dancing, shouting, and he was in the middle of it all, laughing and hugging everyone. He was so drunk. His best friend even came over and said, "Mate, cool it with the flirting," but he just laughed it off. We weren't flirting. We were just connecting. The night was winding down and the crowd was thinning out. The energy between us was practically buzzing. I knew it was now or never. He was swaying on his feet, his eyes barely focused. I leaned in close, my mouth next to his ear so he could hear me over the music. "Come on," I whispered, and I tilted my head towards the hallway where the toilets were. It wasn't a question. It was a dare. A final test. And he followed me. He didn't even hesitate. My heart was pounding as I pushed open the door to the disabled toilet and pulled him in after me. We were finally alone, away from everyone. The music was just a dull beat through the door. This was it. This was the moment I'd been waiting for 2 years. I put my hands on his chest, looked up at him, and I kissed him. For a second, his lips met mine. It was clumsy, wet, and tasted like tequila. And then, it was over. He just went limp, his body sagging against the wall. He blinked slowly, like he was trying to figure out where he was. He mumbled something. I couldn't hear it at first, so I leaned in. "What?" I asked. He said her name. His fiancée's name. That one word hit me like a bucket of ice water. All the air went out of my lungs. It was all in my head. The looks, the emails, the "my love," it meant nothing. He was just a nice, charming boss, and I was just another stupid girl who fell for it. The humiliation was so intense it felt like a physical pain burning up my neck and face. I pushed past him and ran out of the bathroom, out of the bar, and into the cold night air. I practically fell through my front door, tears streaming down my face. My boyfriend was on the couch and jumped up when he saw me. "Jess, what's wrong? What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." The questions came one after another. Where was I? Why was I so late? Why was I crying? I couldn't tell him the truth. I couldn't say I threw myself at my blackout drunk boss and he rejected me for his fiancée. I couldn't bear the thought of him looking at me with pity. The shame was a monster eating me alive. I had to kill it. I had to change the story. A new version of the night started to form in my mind, a version where I wasn't pathetic. I was a victim. A version where he wasn't just a drunk guy who loved his fiancée, but a predator. He followed me, I sobbed, the lie feeling more real with every word. He dragged me into the bathroom. He was so drunk he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't let go of me. He assaulted me. My boyfriend's expression went from worried to pure fury. His face was like thunder. He clenched his fists, his whole body shaking with rage. "That bastard," he spat. He pulled out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. "I'm texting her right now." What's his fiancée's number? She needs to know what kind of monster she's about to marry. I didn't stop him. I just watched his thumb hit send, and it was done. A little part of me felt sick, but a bigger part felt powerful. The story was out of my hands now. It wasn't just my pathetic, humiliating secret anymore. It was his crime. My boyfriend wrapped his arms around me. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you. He's not getting away with this." I buried my face in his chest, my sobs finally feeling real. The wait was the worst part. Every notification on my phone made my heart jump into my throat. I imagined her reading the text, her perfect world cracking. I imagined her screaming at him, crying, throwing his things out. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the pain I felt. My boyfriend was pacing the living room, a soldier waiting for battle. He was angry for me, and it felt good. It felt better than the shame. An hour later, her name flashed on his screen, an incoming call. My boyfriend answered it on speaker, his voice low and dangerous. "Yeah?" Her voice was surprisingly calm. Too calm. "I need to speak with Jessica." "You can talk to me," he snarled. "No," she said, her voice like steel. "I will only speak to Jessica." My boyfriend looked at me and I nodded, my throat dry. He handed me the phone. I took a shaky breath. "Hello." "Jessica," she said, and there was no sympathy in her voice. "Tell me exactly what you are accusing him of." So I did. I told her the story that was now becoming my truth. I told her how he followed me, how he was too strong, how he pushed me against the wall in the toilet. I told her he kissed me, that his hands were all over me. I cried as I said it, making sure she could hear every hitch in my breath. There was a long silence on the other end. I thought maybe she'd hung up. Then she spoke, her voice flat. "He doesn't remember any of it. He was carried to his hotel room. He doesn't remember leaving the bar, let alone going into a toilet with you." The rage flared up in me, hot and real. Of course, he doesn't remember. How convenient he gets to assault me and then just forget about it because he was drunk. Is that his excuse for everything? The lie was my shield now, and I held it up against her cold disbelief. "I know my fiancé," she said quietly. "And I know he wouldn't do that." "You don't know him at all," I shrieked, and then I hung up. I threw the phone on the couch and collapsed into my boyfriend's arms. He held me tight, telling me she was just in denial, that she couldn't handle the truth about her perfect man. I let myself believe him. I had to. The next few days were a blur. The news spread through the office like a virus. It turned out he'd never even made it to his new job. The offer was pulled after HR got an anonymous tip. I still don't know who sent it. His career was torched overnight. People at work were split. Some looked at me with pity and support, whispering about how brave I was. Others looked at me with suspicion, their eyes cold. They'd known him for years, and they couldn't believe it. I avoided them. I ate lunch at my desk. I played the part of the fragile victim, the girl just trying to get through the day. My boyfriend became my shadow, my champion. He drove me to work, he picked me up. He made sure I was never alone. Our relationship, which had been feeling a bit shaky before all this, was suddenly rock solid. He saw me as this strong, wronged woman, and he was my protector. He loved me more for it. All I had to do was keep the story straight. His best friend from work, the one who'd told him to cool it at the party, cornered me by the coffee machine one afternoon. "I don't believe you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He loves her." He was blackout drunk. "What did you really want from him, Jessica?" I felt that old familiar shame creeping up my neck, but I pushed it down. "You should be asking him what he wanted from me," I said, my voice trembling for effect. And I walked away before he could reply. Every time someone doubted me, it just made me cling to the lie harder. It was all I had left. Eventually, the gossip died down. He was gone, a ghost in the office we no longer spoke of. I got a promotion a few months later. Life moved on. My boyfriend and I moved in together. We built a life on the foundation of my lie. Sometimes at night, when he was asleep, I would stare at the ceiling, and the real memory would play in my head, the tequila on his breath, the limp way he sagged against the wall, the sound of her name, a name he chose over mine. I'd feel the humiliation all over again, and I'd remind myself why I did it. He embarrassed me. He led me on for 2 years with his little smiles and his my loves, and then he threw me away for her. He deserved what he got. Years passed. I don't work at that company anymore. My boyfriend and I are engaged now. The other night I was scrolling through social media, a mindless habit, and I saw a photo posted by an old colleague. It was from a wedding. And there he was, smiling, looking happy and healthy. Next to him in a white dress was her. They were married. They'd survived it. They had stayed together through the fire I had set. For a second the world tilted. The truth, the real one, screamed in my head. Asterisk. I did this. I lie. I tried to ruin him because he didn't want me. Asterisk, the weight of it was crushing a physical pressure on my chest. But then just as quickly I shoved it back down into the dark where it belonged. He must have manipulated her. He must have gaslit her into believing him. He got away with it. He got his happy ending while I was the one left with the scars. I closed the app and turned to my fiancée, sleeping beside me. He would never know the truth. No one would. In my story, I'm still the victim. And after all this time, I've learned that if you tell a story long enough, you start to believe it yourself. He made me do it. It was his fault. It had to be.
Story 7.
I'm the wife. The one he wrote about. I know what you all think of me. Monster. Destroyer. The villain of his story. And maybe I am. I did a terrible, unforgivable thing. But a story is never just one person's version, is it? I'm not writing this for your sympathy because I don't deserve it. I'm writing this because I need to understand how I got here, sitting in an empty apartment with nothing but the echo of the life I burned to the ground. My husband is a good man. Let's just get that out of the way. He's brilliant, kind, and a phenomenal father to our 2 girls. He's the kind of man other women look at and think, she's so lucky. And I was. For nearly 20 years, our life was perfect. We had the beautiful house, the 2 well-adjusted kids, the comfortable finances. From the outside, we were the goal. But that perfection was built on a crack, a fault line that ran right through the foundation of our marriage. When we were in our 20s, he got into medical school. It was his dream, the thing he'd worked for his entire life. At the same time, I found out I was pregnant with our first daughter. He didn't hesitate. He gave up his spot, told me a baby with me was more important than any degree, and went to nursing school instead. He became a nurse practitioner, a damn good one, specializing in cardiology. He saved lives. He never, not once, threw it in my face. He never said, I did this for you. He didn't have to. I felt it every single day. Our entire life became a shrine to his sacrifice. The perfect house was proof it was worth it. Our daughter's successes were proof. My comfortable life as a stay-at-home mom turned project manager was proof. Everything had to be perfect to justify the dream he'd given up. The weight of that unspoken debt was crushing. I started to disappear under it. I used to be a firecracker. That's what he called me when we met. I was loud, funny, a little bit reckless. But the wife of the man who gave up everything had to be stable, responsible, quiet. The passion just evaporated. We had sex, sure. We were one of those couples who still did it a few times a week. But it felt like maintenance, like checking the oil in a car. It was another task on the list to keep the perfect machine running smoothly. Our deep conversations on the couch at night, the ones he probably remembers as moments of connection, felt like intellectual exercises to me. We'd talk about philosophy or politics, but we never talked about times, us, asterisk. About the growing distance between us. I was just the wife of a man who settled, and I was settling right alongside him. Then came the attention. It started so small I barely noticed it. I'd gone back to work a few years ago at a large marketing firm. He was younger, a guy on my team. He laughed at my stupid jokes. He'd send me a funny meme during a boring meeting. He told me I was brilliant, that my ideas were the best in the room. It was a drop of water in a desert. It wasn't love. It was never about replacing my husband. It was about feeling seen. It was a reminder of the person I used to be, the firecracker. The first time we went for drinks after work, I told myself it was innocent team bonding. The first time he kissed me in the parking garage, I told myself it was a mistake that would never happen again. But it did. For 18 months, I lived two completely separate lives. In one, I was a loving mother and the wife of a wonderful man I still in my own broken way loved. I cooked dinner, helped with homework, and planned family vacations. In the other life, I was reckless. I was desired. I was having breathless secret encounters in hotels and sending pictures that made my hands shake. It was an addiction. Not to him, the other man, but to the feeling. The thrill. The secret was a little world I built just for me, a place I could go where I wasn't weighed down by sacrifice and quiet perfection. I convinced myself I was in control. I told myself it didn't touch my real life, that it was a fantasy, a game. The secret messages were part of the game. The special toy, I bought a little remote-controlled thing, was a prop. He and I were supposed to go on a business trip together, and I packed it in my suitcase. It felt like playing a character, a woman in a movie who does dangerous, exciting things. I packed it right next to the picture of my husband and my girls that I always take with me. The sick thing is, at that moment, it didn't even feel like a contradiction. My husband and I still had our routine. He was obsessed with technology, with making our perfect home a smart home. Everything was connected to an app on his phone, the lights, the thermostat, even the fancy Dyson fan in our bedroom. He loved being able to control everything with a tap of his finger. Last week we were just sitting on the couch watching some boring show on Netflix. It was a completely normal Tuesday night. The air was a little stuffy, so he picked up my phone from the coffee table where I'd left it screen up. "I'll just turn the fan on," he said, his thumb hovering over the screen to open the app. It was such a normal domestic moment. The kind of moment we'd had 1,000 times before. But as he looked down at the screen, a notification slid down from the top. A text message banner. My heart didn't just drop, it stopped completely. I saw the name and I saw the first few words of the text. It was from him. The other him. My husband's hand froze over the screen. He didn't look at me. He didn't say a word. He just stared at my phone. The sound from the TV, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, everything in the world faded away. There was only the sight of his face slowly going blank, the color draining from it as he read the words on the screen over and over again. He wasn't my husband anymore. He was a statue. And in that awful silent moment I knew the fire I'd been playing with had finally caught and my entire world was about to burn. The silence in that living room was the loudest thing I have ever heard. It felt like hours, but it was probably only a minute. He slowly, deliberately put my phone back down on the table, screen up the hateful little message still glowing. Then he stood up, walked out of the room, and went upstairs to our home office. He didn't slam the door. He closed it with a soft, final click. I sat there frozen on the couch, my blood turning to ice. I didn't know what to do. Should I follow him, apologize, run? I did nothing. I just sat there and waited for the world to end. It didn't end with a bang. It ended with the quiet hum of a printer. For the next 3 days, he barely spoke to me. He slept in the guest room. He was polite, a cold, chilling politeness that was worse than screaming. He'd say good morning and could you pass the salt like he was talking to a stranger. All the while I could hear the printer in the office running off and on for hours at a time. I knew what he was doing. He was building his case. He wasn't a heartbroken husband. He was a prosecutor preparing for trial. The confrontation came on Friday. The girls were at a sleepover. He called me into the living room. On the coffee table where my phone had betrayed me sat a stack of paper. It was enormous. Thick white and bound with a clip. He tapped the top page. 607 pages, he said, his voice completely flat. Every message, every picture, in full color. My legs gave out and I sank onto the floor. He didn't offer a hand. He just watched. He started flipping through the pages, laying them out like evidence. My words. My naked body. My stupid, reckless fantasies all printed out in high resolution on glossy paper. He picked up another item from beside the stack. It was the special toy from my suitcase, the one I'd packed for the business trip. He must have gone through my things. I believe this was for your trip with him, he asked, his voice dripping with mock curiosity. A little fun on the company's dime. I started to sob, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs. Please, I choked out. Let's just talk. I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. Explain, he laughed, but it was a dead sound. There's nothing to explain. It's all right here, he gestured to the pile of my shame. That's when I realized he didn't want an explanation. He didn't want my remorse. He wanted to watch me break. This wasn't about saving our marriage. This was about destroying me. The demolition was swift and brutal. The next morning I woke up to an email. It was a copy of one he had sent to the wife of my affair partner. He attached a 10-page summary of the evidence, complete with the most graphic photos and messages. My stomach heaved. I had not only destroyed my own family, but I had handed my husband the tools to destroy another one, and he used them without a second thought. Then came the call from my boss. He asked me to come in for a meeting with HR. When I got there, my affair partner was already in the waiting room, his face pale and sick. We were called in together. An anonymous complaint had been filed with a corporate compliance line about an inappropriate relationship, misuse of company time, and conduct unbecoming of management. The complaint, of course, came with a detailed dossier of evidence. My husband had sent it all. We were both fired on the spot. I walked out of that building carrying a cardboard box with my personal items, my career of 15 years gone in an instant. I thought that was the bottom. I was wrong. The nights were the worst. He'd come into my room, I was banished to the guest room, and he wouldn't speak. He'd just look at me with a mixture of rage and disgust. Then he'd force himself on me. It wasn't sex. It was punishment. It was rough and painful and completely silent except for my muffled crying. He wanted me to feel worthless, used, and broken. And the worst part, the part that haunts me when I try to sleep, is that he would prop his phone up on the nightstand and record it. He was collecting trophies of my humiliation. He was archiving my lowest moments. The kind, brilliant man I had married was gone. In his place was a cold, cruel stranger who was systematically burning every part of my life to the ground. When I begged him to stop, to talk to me, to scream at me, anything but this cold, methodical torture, he just stared at me. "I'm a ship without a rudder," he said one night, his voice hollow. "You did this. You broke the compass." He was wrong. He wasn't a ship without a rudder. He was the storm. I made a terrible, selfish, catastrophic mistake. I shattered his heart and betrayed his trust, and I will live with that guilt for the rest of my life. I own that. My actions were indefensible. But his response? That was a choice. He didn't choose to leave. He didn't choose to heal. He chose to break me. He chose to ruin my career, my reputation, and my very soul. He chose to become a monster, to punish the monster he saw in me. Now I'm here in this small, quiet apartment that smells like fresh paint. He got the house. He got the kids mostly. I see them on weekends. They look at me differently now. They look at me with his eyes. I know I'm the villain of his story, and maybe I deserve it. But sometimes in the middle of the night, when I wake up from a dream of him holding that camera, I wonder what happens when the hero of the story becomes the one who terrifies you the most. We were a perfect picture, and I was the one who ripped it. But he was the one who took the pieces and set them all on fire.
Story 8.
I know what people say about me. I've heard the stories, probably the same ones my daughter's friend posted online. The crazy mother. The narcissistic, abusive monster who ruined everything. It's an easy story to tell, and even easier to believe, especially when my ex-husband Mark spent the better part of a year carefully building that exact image of me for everyone to see. But no one ever wants to hear how a monster is made. They just want to see the claws. For 20 years, my world was Mark and our daughter Amelia. I wasn't just a wife or a mother. I was the architect of our lives. I managed the house, the finances, the school schedules, the social calendar. I built our world brick by brick while Mark went to work and played the part of the fun, easygoing dad. It worked for us. I thought we were happy. Then one day he came home and announced he wasn't anymore. Just like that. 20 years erased over a cup of coffee at the kitchen table I picked out. The divorce wasn't just a separation. It was a demolition. Mark didn't just want to leave. He wanted to win. He wanted to leave me with nothing. He hired a shark of a lawyer who started picking apart our life piece by piece. Every vacation we took, every piece of furniture I bought, every pitiful thing, as his lawyer called it, became a point of contention. He wanted the house I'd made a home. He wanted the savings I'd carefully managed. Most of all, he wanted to make sure our daughter A saw me as the reason our perfect life was falling apart. He was so good at it. He would take her out for dinner and fill her head with poison, all disguised as fatherly concern. "Your mother is just very emotional right now," he'd say. "We have to be patient with her." He'd tell her lies about our money, making it sound like I was hiding it or spending it recklessly on my own lawyer, when in reality his legal team was draining our accounts with endless, pointless motions. He painted a picture of me as unstable and unreasonable, and A, my sweet girl, started to believe him. Then came the Washington trip. It was a big deal at her school, a week-long trip that cost a ridiculous $2,500. When A first brought home the permission slip, my heart sank. We were bleeding money. But Mark was right there, beaming over her shoulder on FaceTime. "Of course you can go, sweetie. We'll make it happen," he said, a big, generous hero. He knew I was the one who actually had to look at the bank statements. It was a performance, and I was the designated villain who had to deal with the real-world consequences. For A's sake, I played along. I told her we'd figure it out. I even helped her with the school fundraisers. We spent a whole weekend selling overpriced candy bars outside the grocery store. I thought maybe if we do this together, she'll see I'm on her side. For a little while, it felt like old times. But then she'd come home from a weekend with her dad, and the shift was immediate. "Dad said you're probably stressed, but he knows we can afford it," she'd say, parroting his exact words. "He said, you just worry too much." It felt like a knife twisting in my gut. He was using this trip, this one special thing, for her to prove his point. To prove that he was the generous, reasonable parent, and I was the difficult, stingy one. The trip was no longer about history or friendship or a fun school activity. It was a battlefield, and I was losing her inch by painful inch. She was 3 weeks from the payment deadline and still needed $800. She looked at me with those big, hopeful eyes, and all I could see was his reflection in them. The breaking point wasn't even about A. It was an email from my lawyer. Mark was refusing to compromise on the division of our retirement savings. He wanted 60%. His justification was that I hadn't contributed as much because I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 years. 10 years I'd spent raising our child, managing our world so he could build his career. I was looking at a future where I might have to sell my car, a future I didn't recognize and hadn't prepared for. I felt a cold, hard panic rise in my chest. That evening, A came into my room. She was practically vibrating with excitement. "My friends and I were planning our roommate groups for the hotel in D," she said, completely oblivious to the fact that our world was on fire around her. That's when I knew I had to do it. I had to make her see reality. I sat her down and told her as calmly as I could that the trip wasn't going to happen. "We can't afford it, honey," I said. "Your father's choices have consequences for all of us." It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was a lesson. It was the truth. The tears started immediately. Huge, gulping sobs. But they didn't look like the tears of a disappointed child. They looked practiced. They were the same tears Mark used whenever he was backed into a corner, the same manipulative waterworks designed to make me feel guilty and cruel. She wasn't just sad about a trip. She was angry she wasn't getting her way. "But Dad said we could," she wailed. "You're just saying no to punish him." Something inside me snapped shut. The part that was soft and patient just broke. "No, Amelia," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "I'm saying no because I am the adult who has to pay the bills your father is creating. I will not be helping you with the rest of the money, and I am officially revoking my permission. You are not going." He could play the hero all he wanted. But I had to be the parent. I had to be the one to say no, even if it made her hate me. The next few weeks were a nightmare of stony silence. A would barely look at me. She spent every moment she could on the phone, whispering to her friends or to her father. I knew I was being painted as the evil witch in her story, but I held my ground. This was about more than a trip. It was about respect. It was about reality. Then one afternoon she came home from school. I heard the front door open and close, but she didn't go to her room. She walked right into the kitchen where I was standing, and she was smiling. A real, genuine smile, the kind I hadn't seen directed at me in months. It was so jarring it made me freeze. "What is it?" I asked. She couldn't contain it. She was beaming. "You're not going to believe it," she said, her voice full of pure joy. "Someone paid the rest of the money for my trip. The school called me into the office. The last $800, it's all paid. I can go." My blood ran cold. It wasn't relief or happiness I felt. It was the icy certainty of a trap springing shut. I knew with the kind of gut-wrenching instinct only a mother has that Mark was behind this. "Who?" I asked, my voice flat. "Who paid for it?" "You don't even know him. It's V's dad." "You know V, the girl I sit with in history. Her dad heard I was having trouble and just paid it." "Isn't that amazing? Some people are just so nice." The story was so absurd, so perfectly constructed to be unbelievable, that it could only have come from Mark. V was the girl who had been making snide comments to Amelia about our divorce for months. The idea that her father would suddenly become a charitable benefactor was laughable. It was a lie, a flimsy cover story my ex-husband had created to funnel the money in without me being able to prove it. He got to be the secret hero, the anonymous savior, while I was left looking like the monster who had almost kept her from her dream. It was brilliant. It was cruel. "Amelia, think about it," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That doesn't make any sense. It was your father. He went behind my back and paid it, and he made up this ridiculous story so you wouldn't know." Her face fell. The brilliant smile vanished, replaced by that familiar stubborn scowl. "Oh my God," she said, throwing her hands up. "Of course, I knew you'd do this. I knew you would find a way to ruin it and make it about Dad. Why can't you just be happy for me, for once?" "I'm not trying to ruin it," I pleaded. "I'm trying to make you see what he's doing. He's manipulating you. He's making me the enemy." "No," she said, her voice rising. "You're doing that all by yourself." She turned and stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. I stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the life I had built, and felt it all turning to dust. He hadn't just paid the $800. He had bought another piece of my daughter's loyalty, and he'd used my money to do it. A few days later, I came home from a meeting with my lawyer that had left me feeling sick and defeated. As I walked in, I saw an open suitcase on the floor of the hallway. Amelia was pulling clothes out of her closet and folding them. "What's going on?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. She didn't look at me. She just kept folding a sweater. "I'm going to live with Dad," she said, her voice clipped and distant. He's coming to get me in an hour." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. This was it. The final move in his game. He'd won. "You can't do that," I said, the words coming out as a choked whisper. "This is your home. We haven't even settled anything with the lawyers." She finally looked up and her eyes were hard. "I don't care. I can't live here anymore. It's too stressful." Stressful, I laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. "You think this is stressful for you? Try having the man you built a life with systematically tear it down and turn your own child against you. He planned this, Amelia. The trip, the money, all of it. It was all a setup to get you to do this." "He's the only one who listens to me," she shouted, her voice cracking. "He's the only one who cares about what I want. You just want to control everything." "I want to protect you," I screamed back, the months of frustration and fear finally boiling over. "From him, he is poisoning you against me, and you're just letting him." Then she said the words. The words I knew weren't hers, the ones that had been polished and fed to her like a script. "Dad said you'd be like this. He said you have a narcissistic rage when you don't get your way. He said you'd try to make me feel guilty." His words. His diagnosis. Coming from my daughter's mouth. In that moment I didn't see Amelia. I saw him. I saw his smug, condescending face. I saw his lawyers. I saw the last 20 years of my life being repackaged as a lie. All the stress, the betrayal, the constant dizzying, gaslighting, it all exploded inside me. It wasn't a thought. It was just a reaction. A raw, animalistic impulse. I raised my hand and I struck her across the face. The sound of it was sharp and ugly in the quiet house. We both froze, stunned. The red mark bloomed on her cheek instantly. Her eyes wide with shock and fear, filled with tears. This time they weren't manipulative. They were real. And they were because of me. A wave of absolute horror washed over me. I had become the monster he told her I was. "Ames, I started, my hand trembling as I reached for her. She flinched back like I was a wild animal. "Don't touch me," she sobbed, and ran to her room, slamming and locking the door. I heard her on the phone, her voice frantic and broken, telling him to come. Now. I just stood there, paralyzed by shame. The fight was over. He had engineered this moment for months, pushing and pushing until I finally broke, and now he had his proof. I had done the one thing I could never take back. When Mark arrived, he didn't even look at me. He walked straight to her room, spoke to her in a low, comforting voice, and then emerged with her and her suitcase. She kept her face turned away from me, her eyes fixed on the floor. He paused at the front door and finally looked at me, not with anger, but with a look of cold, clinical pity. It was worse than any rage he could have shown. It was the look of a man who had just been proven right. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours," he said simply, and then they were gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me in a house that was suddenly overwhelmingly silent. They went to Washington. I saw the pictures online a week later, posted by her friends. Amelia, smiling in front of the Lincoln Memorial, her arm around her dad. They looked so happy. A perfect father-daughter duo starting their new life. He got everything he wanted. the daughter, the moral high ground, the victory. I was left with an empty house filled with memories that felt like they belonged to someone else. I was left with the bills, the legal fees, and the label he had so carefully crafted for me. The crazy, unstable ex-wife. The narcissistic, abusive mother who deserved to be left all alone. And the worst part is in that one horrible, unforgivable moment, I handed him the proof myself.
Story 9.
I know what you think of me. I know the names you'd call me if you knew who I was. And you'd be right. I destroyed my family. I cheated on a good man and had a baby with a stranger. There's no excuse for what I did, but I need someone to hear the story from my side. Not for forgiveness, just for a second to understand how a person can get so lost they'd burn down their own house just to feel the warmth. Before all this, my life looked perfect. My husband, let's call him David, is a genuinely good person. We had 2 beautiful little boys, a nice house in the suburbs. I had a career I loved. From the outside, we were the American dream. But on the inside, I was disappearing. When our first son was born, a piece of me vanished. I wasn't me anymore, I was Mom. When our second son came along, another piece chipped away. I became a collection of functions: chef, maid, nurse, chauffeur. I loved my boys with an ache so deep it hurt, but the love was tangled up in the crushing, endless routine of their needs. David saw a functioning household. He'd come home from work where he was still a person with a name and a purpose, and see that the kids were fed, the house was clean, and his wife smiled on cue. He never saw the person behind the smile who was silently screaming. He never saw that I was drowning in the quiet. It wasn't a loud, dramatic depression. It was a slow, creeping fog. It muffled the whole world and made me feel like I was watching my own life through a thick pane of glass. Then COVID hit and I lost my job. That was the last part of my old self, the last thing that connected me to the person I used to be. Suddenly, I was nothing but mom and wife 24/7. The fog got thicker. I'd spend whole days not speaking to another adult until David got home, and by then he was tired. And I was so numb, I couldn't even form the words to explain how empty I felt. How do you tell the man you love that his perfect life feels like a cage? Last year, David had a work conference in Philadelphia. He couldn't go, but the trip was already paid for, so he suggested I go instead. A long weekend all to myself. A break. He thought it would be a gift. I thought maybe I could breathe again. But I just packed my emptiness into my suitcase and took it with me. I spent the first day wandering around a city full of people who were laughing and talking and living, and I had never felt more invisible in my life. That night I went to the hotel bar. I didn't want to drink, I just wanted to be around noise. I sat in a corner watching people and felt like a ghost. Then a man sat down a few seats away. He smiled. He wasn't trying to pick me up, not at first. He just started talking to me. He asked my name. Not if I was married, not if I had kids. Just my name. And when I said it, it sounded strange, like a word I hadn't used in years. We talked for hours. He was just a guy passing through town on business like me. He was black, funny, and he listened. He saw a woman sitting at a bar, not a collection of duties. For one night I wanted to feel something. Anything other than the crushing numbness. I wanted to do something that was just for me, something that wasn't for my husband or my kids. It was a selfish, stupid, and self-destructive impulse. It wasn't about him. It wasn't about passion or love. It was a scream into the void. A desperate, ugly act by a woman who just wanted to feel real. The regret hit me before he had even left the hotel room. It was a cold, sick feeling in my stomach, a horror at what I had just done. I flew home the next morning and threw myself back into my routine, praying I could bury it, pretend it was just a bad dream. A few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. The sick feeling turned into pure terror. I lived on a knife's edge for months, praying for a miracle. I told myself that genetics are weird, that maybe the baby would look enough like David that no one would know. I held on to that stupid, impossible hope. But when I gave birth to my daughter, there was no more pretending. She was perfect. Tiny, beautiful, with a head of dark curly hair and skin the color of warm honey. And she looked nothing like my husband or my sons. When David looked at her and then looked at me, his face didn't change. There was no anger, no shouting, just a quiet, awful click as everything fell into place for him. The silence in that hospital room was the loudest sound I've ever heard. My whole world broke in that silence. I confessed everything. There was no point in lying anymore. The truth was right there in my arms. He filed for divorce right away. But we're still here, living in the same house. We can't afford for one of us to move out, and honestly, I'm such a wreck he's worried about me being alone with the kids. We are living in the wreckage I created. And the cruelest part of it all is his grace. He helps with the baby, my baby. He holds her, he feeds her, he changes her. When his own mother made a disgusting comment about her, he cut her off completely. He defends this perfect, innocent child from the racism of our family and friends. They think her race is the sin. They don't get it. The sin was mine and mine alone. My boys adore their little sister. They don't see color, they just see their baby. And watching David with them, teaching them to be gentle with her, to protect her, it breaks me. He's worried they'll grow up and hate her because of what she represents. He's already teaching them to love her fiercely, to be a wall around her. He is being a father to a child that isn't his in a way that I'm too broken to be a mother to any of them right now. Now he's insisting we find her biological father. He says she deserves to know her history, to have access to her medical information. He says it's the right thing to do for times her asterisk. So he ordered an ancestry DNA kit. He wants me to help him search to reach back into that one night in Philadelphia and find the man whose last name I don't even know. He wants to bring the cause of all this pain right to our doorstep because he thinks it's what's best for my daughter. The man I betrayed is trying to clean up my mess to build something decent for our children from the ashes. We spit in the tubes a few weeks ago and sent them off. I've been dreading it every single day. I check my email with a feeling of pure doom, waiting for the notification. This morning I was feeding the baby when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was an email with the subject line, "Your ancestry DNA results are in." David was in the other room with the boys. I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling like I was standing on a cliff, and the ground was finally about to give way. I took a shaky breath, the baby shifting in my arms. My whole body felt like it was humming with electricity. I could hear David in the living room, the cheerful sound of the TV show he was watching with our boys. It was so normal, so peaceful, and I was about to shatter it all over again. I walked out of the kitchen, my phone clutched in my hand like a bomb. "David," my voice was a whisper. He looked up from the couch, his smile fading when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I just held out the phone. He took it, read the subject line, and all the color drained from his face. He gently took the baby from my arms and handed her to me, then stood up. Let's go to the office. He led the way, shutting the door behind us. The sounds of the cartoons were muffled now a world away. We sat in front of the computer side by side, not touching. He put my daughter times our times daughter in the bassinet next to the desk. He logged into the website with steady hands I didn't understand. I felt like I was going to throw up. The page loaded full of charts and percentages. My heart was a drum against my ribs. David clicked on DNA relatives. And there it was. Not his name, not the man from the bar, but a name listed as a first cousin. A woman. Below her name was a projected age and a location. Not Philadelphia, but close. My breath hitched. It was real. A real person, a real family connected to my daughter. David was silent for a full minute, just staring at the screen. I expected him to get up and leave. I expected him to finally yell. Instead, he just let out a long, slow breath. "Okay," he said, his voice flat. "This is the first step." He clicked on her profile. There was a picture. A smiling woman who looked nothing and everything like the man I barely remembered. And there was a button. Message. "I can't," I whispered. "David, I can't do this." He turned to look at me, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his composure. His eyes were bloodshot. "We have to," he said, his voice raw. "This isn't about us anymore. This is about her. She needs this. She needs to have the option to know." He took the keyboard. "What do we say?" I was useless, a frozen statue of guilt. He did it himself. He typed out a message, his fingers moving slowly but deliberately. It was short, polite, and devastating. He explained that we believed her first cousin was the biological father of our newborn daughter, born on this date. He said we were seeking medical history, and if the father was willing a line of communication for the child's sake. He didn't use my name. He just said, "Her mother." He read it out loud to me, asked if it was okay, and I just nodded, unable to form words. He hit send. The waiting was the worst part of my life. Every buzz of my phone made me jump. For 2 days there was nothing. We moved around each other like ghosts in the house, the unspoken thing hanging in the air between us. David was quiet, but he was still there. He'd take the baby for hours so I could try to sleep. He'd make sure I was eating. He was taking care of me while we waited for the grenade I'd thrown into our lives to finally explode. Then on the 3rd day I got an email. It wasn't from the cousin. It was from a man. The subject line was just my daughter's name. My heart stopped. He said his cousin had forwarded him the message. He said he was shocked. He said he remembered that night in Philadelphia. And he gave me his phone number. He said to call him when I was ready. I showed the email to David. He read it, then looked at me. "We should call him together," he said. An hour later, we were back in the office, the baby asleep in her bassinet again. David was sitting next to me, the phone on speaker between us on the desk. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely dial the number. It rang twice. "Hello," a voice said. The voice from the bar. I froze. David reached over and squeezed my arm, a silent command to speak. "Hi," I croaked. It's me. From Philadelphia." There was a long pause. "Wow. Okay. Hi." He sounded normal. Not angry, not scary. Just like a guy who just had his world turned upside down. "My name is Marcus." And then I had to tell the story. With my husband sitting next to me, I had to explain that I was married, that I had gone home and discovered I was pregnant, and that I had a daughter. A beautiful, healthy little girl. David didn't say a word. He just sat there, a pillar of impossible strength, while I confessed my failure to the stranger I had shared it with. Marcus was quiet for a long time after I finished. "A daughter," he finally said, his voice thick. Is she okay?" "She's perfect," David said, speaking for the first time. His voice was steady and clear. It made Marcus jump on the other end of the line. This is my husband," I stammered. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a building. "Look," David said, taking charge. "I know this is a shock. We're not asking you for anything right now. Not money, not anything. But our daughter deserves to have her full medical history. And she deserves to know who her biological father is, if you're ever open to that." They talked for another 20 minutes. David asked about his family's health history. Marcus answered everything. He was stunned, overwhelmed, but he was decent. He has no other children. He isn't married. He kept saying he needed to think. He promised to send a detailed family medical history. Before he hung up, he asked one more question. "What's her name?" I told him. He repeated it softly, then said, "Goodbye." The call ended. The room was silent again. The awful, suffocating silence. David didn't look at me. He just stared at the wall, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. Then his shoulders started to shake. It wasn't loud, just a quiet, gut-wrenching tremor. He buried his face in his hands and he just broke. For the first time since that day in the hospital, he cried. Not in anger, but in pure, unfiltered pain. The sound of his grief was the price of my actions, and it was a sound I will hear for the rest of my life. I didn't dare touch him. I just sat there, drowned in the horror of what I'd done to this good man. He is filing for divorce, but he still sat by my side and helped me contact my affair partner for the good of a child that isn't his. He absorbed that blow for her and for me. That was a week ago. Marcus sent the medical history. David is talking about setting up a trust for her in case Marcus ever wants to contribute. He's already thinking 10 steps ahead, building a world for this little girl, trying to stitch together the pieces I shattered. I am still here in the house I destroyed, watching the man I betrayed lovingly build a future from the wreckage. I don't know if he will ever forgive me. I know I will never forgive myself. All I can do now is try to be the mother my children deserve, and honor the grace of a man who has shown me a love I never earned, and a kindness I will never be able to repay.
Story Teen.
I need to tell my side of the story. I know what she's been saying about me at work to the landlord, to anyone who will listen. She paints me as some crazy old monster, but she doesn't tell people the whole truth. She leaves out the parts that make her look bad, and she has no idea what was really going on in my life. My life has not been easy. You get to be my age, nearly 60, and you start to become invisible. The world belongs to young people, and you're just there. The bills get bigger every year, but the paycheck doesn't. The house gets quieter. My husband passed away years ago, and my kids are grown with their own lives hundreds of miles away. The silence can be deafening. It's not a peaceful quiet. It's a heavy, lonely quiet that presses down on you. When she needed a place to stay, it felt like an answer to a prayer I didn't even know I was saying. She was just a kid, really 23, and new at the company. So quiet and shy. I saw a bit of myself in her from a long, long time ago. I thought this was my chance. I wasn't just getting a roommate to help pay the mortgage. I was getting a chance to have a family again, even a small, strange one. I thought I could help her, guide her a little bit. She seemed so lost. I imagined us making dinner together, watching TV on the couch, talking about our shifts. I was so excited to have that life in the house again, someone to look out for. That dream fell apart almost immediately. The quiet I thought was shyness was actually a fortress. She would come home from work, go straight to her room, and shut the door. I wouldn't see her again until the next morning. It was like living with a ghost. I tried so hard to break through. I'd knock on her door in the morning with a cup of coffee just to say hello and start the day on a friendly note. She'd look at me like I was an intruder, like I'd just broken into her house. The look on her face, it made me feel like a creep. I tried to establish some simple house rules, the kind of things that make a house a home. I asked her to please keep the living room curtains open during the day. It's a dark room, and the sunlight makes it feel so much more cheerful and alive. I also asked if she could just tidy up her things when she was done in the common areas. A coffee mug on the table, a jacket on the chair, no big deal, but it adds up. These weren't demands. I was trying to say, let's both take pride in the space. Let's build a nice home together. She just looked at me with those cold eyes and said no. She said she liked her privacy and didn't want the neighbors looking in. She treated every suggestion like a personal attack. I wasn't her housemate. I was just the landlord she had to put up with. The worst part was the money. It was humiliating. An unexpected car repair came up and it completely wiped me out. I was a few days from payday and I was short $100 for the electric bill. I was sick with worry. I finally got up the nerve to ask her if I could borrow it just for a couple of days. I thought, this is what you do for people you live with. You help each other out. The way she looked at me with this mix of pity and disgust, I've never felt so small in my life. She said no, that she wasn't comfortable with it. It wasn't about the money. I would have paid her back the second my check cleared. It was the message she sent. You are not my family. You are not my friend. You are a problem. A week later, I was stuck on a conference call for work that was running late, and I needed cash for groceries on the way home. I texted her and asked if she could possibly run to the ATM for me with her card, and I'd pay her back for the fee and everything as soon as I got home. It would have taken her 10 minutes. She just replied, "No, sorry." No explanation. Just no. She didn't trust me. She saw this desperate old woman and probably thought I was going to drain her account. That refusal stung more than anything. It proved she thought the absolute worst of me. I felt like I was going crazy because sometimes she would do something that seemed kind, but it always felt like it had an edge to it. One day I came home from a double shift, completely exhausted, and she had done my laundry. It was all folded in a basket on the living room couch. I was so touched I almost cried. But then it just sat there. For a whole day. It was this silent monument to her one good deed. I was working all the time. My back was killing me, and I texted her and asked, "Hey, I know you're upstairs. Would you mind just bringing that basket up for me? I'm so tired." She never even replied. The laundry just sat there. It felt passive-aggressive. Like she was saying, "I did this one nice thing for you, now you owe me, and I'm not lifting another finger." I was drowning, and she was standing on the side of the pool, watching. I'd call her when she was out sometimes, just to see when she'd be home, just to know there would be another human being in the house with me that night. She told me I was suffocating her. I wasn't trying to suffocate her. I was the one who couldn't breathe. The loneliness was suffocating me, and she was my only lifeline. A lifeline that didn't want to be touched. I couldn't take it anymore. The silence, the rejection, the feeling of being a guest in my own home. I finally hit my breaking point. I sat on my bed, my hands shaking, and I typed out a text. It wasn't an eviction. It wasn't an attack. It was a cry for help. I thought maybe if she thinks she's going to have to move, she'll finally talk to me. Maybe she'll finally ask what's wrong. I wrote, "I don't think this is working out." I stared at the screen for a long time, my heart pounding. All I wanted was for her to write back and say, "Why? Let's talk about it." I just wanted to fix it. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't completely alone. I hit send. And then I waited. Her reply came through a few minutes later. It wasn't a question. It wasn't an offer to talk. It was just 2 words. "I agree." That was it. My heart just sank into my stomach. I had held out this little bit of hope that she would see my text for what it was, a desperate plea. Instead, she just slammed the door in my face. There was no fixing this. There was nothing to even talk about. She wanted out. The wall of ice she had built between us was never going to come down. I felt so stupid, so naive. I had imagined a family, and she had just been counting the days until she could get away from me. The next day, she was gone. I came home from work to a house that was quieter than it had ever been. The silence was different this time. It wasn't just lonely, it was angry. Her bedroom door was wide open, and the room was bare. She hadn't just moved out. She had erased herself. And she had done it like a thief in the night, without even the decency of a goodbye. I walked into the living room and flicked the light switch. Nothing. I tried another lamp. Nothing. The power was on, but the TV wouldn't turn on, and my phone wasn't connecting to the internet. I went over to the modem and saw the empty space where it used to be. The lights were blinking on the box, but the cord was gone. She had taken it. She had canceled the Wi-Fi and the cable services that were in her name, sure, but she knew I needed them. I worked from home half the time. How could she be so cruel? To just cut me off from the world like that, without a word of warning. It was a final parting shot designed to hurt me as much as possible. I went to the kitchen to get a drink, and even the ice cube tray was gone from the freezer. It was so petty, so childish. It was all over a disagreement about curtains and asking her to bring my laundry upstairs. The fallout was a complete nightmare. She had left a few things behind a box of old videotapes that had belonged to her dad, she'd once told me. They seemed important. I texted her to come get them. I just wanted this to be over. She refused to come to the house alone. She said she'd only come with a landlord present. She was manipulating the whole situation, painting me as some kind of threat, someone she was afraid of. Me, a 60-year-old woman who just wanted a little companionship. A few days later, she got her way. I was sitting on the back porch, on the phone with my boss, trying desperately to explain why I'd been so distracted and off my game at work. The stress was eating me alive. And then I saw them through the sliding glass door. It was her and the landlord creeping around my house like I was a criminal. She was pointing at things, talking in a low voice. She took him into her old room, which she had, of course, left spotless, probably cleaner than it ever was when she lived there. She was putting on a show, making herself look like the perfect responsible tenant who had escaped a crazy old landlady. The landlord didn't even bother to hear my side of the story. He came out onto the porch, his face set like stone, and handed her back her full security deposit right there in front of me. It was a slap in the face. It was him saying, "I believe her. You're the problem." I just stood there speechless. She took the check, grabbed her box of tapes, and walked out of my life without even looking at me. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. An hour after she left, my boss called me back. He said my performance had been declining for weeks, that they needed someone more focused. He was letting me go. I was fired. On the exact same day that she finalized her escape. She hadn't just moved out. She had detonated a bomb in the middle of my life and walked away without a single scratch deposit in hand. The stress she put me through, the constant feeling of rejection in my own home, the sleepless nights, it all led to this. I lost my roommate, my dignity, and my job all at once. The worst part is what came after. I found out from an old coworker, one of the few who still talks to me, what she's been saying. She's telling everyone I was trying to steal from her. That I'm unstable. She took my loneliness, my desperate attempts to connect, and twisted them into something ugly and scary. She's the victim in her story. The poor young girl who escaped from the clutches of the crazy old woman. She didn't see a lonely person desperate for a family. She saw a mark. She used me for a cheap room, and when my problems, my real human problems, became inconvenient for her, she threw me away and ruined my life in the process. She wasn't just a quiet girl who wanted her privacy. She was cold and calculating. She took the little flicker of hope I had for a life with less silence, and she stomped it out. Now the silence is all I have left. And it's louder than ever.
Story 11.
I'm the woman who cheated. The fiancé. I'm sure you've all heard his side of the story, and I'm sure it makes me sound like a monster, and maybe I am. But you only heard about the ending. You didn't hear about the 3 years before that, about how a person can drown in a perfectly calm, sunlit sea. When we met in college, it was electric. We weren't just two people. We were the center of a huge group of friends. There were parties, late-night study sessions that turned into debates about everything, road trips we decided on at 2 a.m. We were both alive, both loud in our own ways. He was smart and funny and a little shy, which I found so charming. I was the outgoing one, the one who made the plans, and he was my calm center. It worked. It was more than work. It was amazing. The change was slow. I barely noticed it at first. After graduation, he landed a great job in finance, and I moved into his apartment. Not our apartment times his asterisk. That was the first small sign. My life, which had been this sprawling thing with a dozen different friend groups and hobbies, started to shrink. It wasn't anything he said, not directly. It was quieter than that. It was the way he'd look a little hurt if I had plans with my friends on a Friday night. The way he'd say, "Oh, I was hoping we could just stay in." His shyness, the thing I used to love, started to feel like a magnet pulling all of my energy toward him, leaving none for myself. My friends would invite me out and I'd find myself saying no more and more often just to avoid that quiet, disappointed look on his face. He never forbade me from doing anything. He was too nice for that. Instead, he'd just make our home so comfortable, so perfect, that going out felt like a betrayal. He loved me, I truly believe that. But it felt like the love someone has for a rare butterfly. He wanted to pin me under glass, to keep me perfect and safe and entirely his. The proposal was the moment the glass case locked. He did it in front of all our friends and family at a barbecue. Everyone was crying and cheering. I smiled and said, "Yes, because what else could I do?" But inside I felt a cold dread. This was it. The final step in becoming Mrs. Perfect, the wife of a great guy living a life that looked flawless from the outside but felt like a cage on the inside. I felt my name, my identity, everything I was before him just dissolving. That's when I started pulling away. He must have noticed. I was quieter, I stopped suggesting things for us to do. I was just there. Every time he called me his fiancée, my stomach twisted. Every time he touched me, it felt less like affection and more like he was checking to make sure his prized possession was still on the shelf. At Thanksgiving that year, my own mom pulled me into the kitchen. She'd seen how quiet I was, how I barely looked at him. She said, "What is wrong with you? He is a wonderful man. You're being cruel." She didn't see that I was suffocating. She just saw that I was failing at my one job, being the perfect happy partner to her perfect future son-in-law. That's when I met Mark at work. He was a mistake, a terrible cliché. He was older, married, and a complete mess. But he was my mistake. It was the first decision I'd made for myself, by myself, in years. He didn't look at me like I was a fragile object. He saw my unhappiness and didn't try to fix it. Being with him was reckless and selfish and wrong, but it was the only time I felt like I was in the driver's seat of my own life. I wasn't his fiancée, I wasn't anyone's daughter. I was just me making a bad choice. And it felt incredible. Then my fiancé got a new project at work. He'd have to travel Monday to Friday for several weeks. When he told me, I pretended to be sad, but honestly it was like someone opened a window in a stuffy room. I could breathe again. The constant feeling of being watched, of being managed, was gone. And in that freedom I fell deeper with Mark. The affair went from emotional to physical. It was wrong, I know that. But it was the only thing that felt real in a life that had become a performance. My fiancé came home one weekend determined to spoil me. He took me to a fancy dinner, bought me jewelry. The whole time it felt like an interrogation disguised as romance. He kept asking if I was happy, if there was anything I wanted to tell him. It was so strange. He wasn't accusing me of anything, but it felt like he knew something was off. He was pushing me to confess, and I could see the whole script play out in my head. I would cry, I would confess. He would be the bigger person and forgive me. And then he would have me back in the box more securely than ever. I couldn't give him that. The next week he called. The big client meeting he was supposed to fly to Barbados for was happening remotely instead. He'd already booked the non-refundable all-inclusive trip. He couldn't go. But he said I should. I should take a friend and go relax on the beach for a week, his treat. It felt so bizarre, so convenient. It was another test. A final exam, asterisk. Go be free and let me see what you do with it. Asterisk. I knew who I was going to ask before he even finished the sentence. Calling Mark was the ultimate act of self-destruction. It was a final, desperate scream telling the world and myself that I would rather burn my perfect life to the ground than let myself disappear inside it. I packed my bags for a week in paradise, a week of bad decisions under the sun. I knew deep down that when I came back, nothing would ever be the same. I just had no idea how right I was. The week in Barbados was a blur of sun, sand, and the hollow feeling of getting exactly what I thought I wanted. Mark was fun, but the closer we got to the flight home, the more I realized he was just an escape route, not a destination. The fantasy was over. Reality was waiting at baggage claim. The moment we landed, something felt wrong. I turned my phone on, but it wouldn't connect to the network. No service. I figured it was just an issue with the airport's reception. Mark dropped me off at the apartment building, a quick, awkward kiss on the cheek before he drove away to his real life, his wife, his own mess. I stood on the sidewalk with my suitcase and suddenly felt incredibly lonely. I knocked on the door to our apartment. A woman I'd never seen before, maybe in her late 40s, opened it. She was holding a toddler. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice friendly but confused. I think you have the wrong apartment," I stammered. "This is 3B. It is," she said, shifting the child on her hip. "We just moved in last week." The world tilted. It felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. I must have looked like a ghost because her husband came to the door. "Is everything okay?" I couldn't speak. I just shook my head and backed away, dragging my suitcase behind me. My hands were shaking as I tried my phone again. Still no service. I borrowed a stranger's phone to call him. A recorded voice answered. "The number you have dialed has been disconnected." Disconnected. Not off, not dead. Disconnected. Panic started crawling up my throat, cold and sharp. I tried to log into our joint bank account app. Invalid login. Every door was slamming shut one by one. I was locked out of my own life. There was only one person left to call. My mom. I expected her to be worried, to tell me to get in a cab and come home. But the voice that answered was one I didn't recognize. It was my mother's, but it was flat and cold like a sheet of metal. "Mom!" I cried, relief and fear mixing in my voice. "Something's wrong." "The apartment, the phone." "I know," she said. There was no warmth, no sympathy. "What do you mean, you know? Where is he?" There was a long pause. "He was here," she said, her voice like ice. "He came 2 days ago. He dropped off your things." The words didn't make sense. Dropped off my things. I pictured a few bags, some clothes. "What things?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Everything, Sarah. All of it. Your clothes, your books, your furniture." Your entire life is in boxes in my garage." He had done it. While I was in Barbados, he had come to the apartment we shared, and he had packed up every single trace of me. He had emptied my drawers, my closet, my side of the bathroom cabinet. He had taken down my pictures. He had ended the lease, closed the accounts, changed his number, and moved out. And then he drove 600 miles to my mother's house and delivered my boxed-up life to her doorstep. He told me everything. My mom continued, her voice gaining a sharp, bitter edge. "About your coworker, about Barbados. While he was working himself to the bone for you, for your future. In one single calculated move, he hadn't just left me. He had erased me. He dismantled our life brick by brick, and then he poisoned the last safe harbor I had. He turned my own mother against me without me even being there to defend myself. He didn't scream at me, he didn't confront me. He never gave me the chance to explain or to apologize or to fight. He just deleted me. Quietly. Efficiently. Completely. I finally made it to my mother's house. It was even worse than I imagined. The garage was filled with brown cardboard boxes. My name was written on each one in his neat, perfect handwriting. It looked like evidence from a crime scene. Inside, my mother was a storm of silent rage. Her coldness finally broke, but not in the way I needed. She told me my father had moved out. He'd also been having an affair. The irony was suffocating. My own mother was facing the exact same betrayal, and instead of bringing us together, it made her look at me with pure disgust, like I was the same disease that had ruined her own life. I spent the next few weeks living in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the boxed-up remains of my adult life. I tried to find him, to talk to him, but he was a ghost. He had disappeared from social media. Our mutual friends wouldn't answer my calls. He had executed his plan with chilling precision. And that's when I finally understood. The shy, quiet, loving man I was engaged to was a character he played. The real man was underneath. Someone cold, methodical, and more controlling than I ever could have imagined. His love wasn't the warm, forgiving kind. It was the love of a curator for his collection. He wanted me to be perfect, to sit on his shelf and be admired. The second I showed a crack, the second I wasn't the perfect piece he had chosen, I wasn't worth fixing. I was just broken. And you don't fix broken things. You throw them away. He didn't get angry because he wasn't heartbroken. He was just inconvenienced. His perfect life plan had a flaw, and he corrected it by cutting out the flawed part, me. I did a terrible thing, and I will live with that forever. But his response wasn't that of a man in pain. It was the response of a manager firing a bad employee. He didn't want a partner. He wanted an object. And when the object misbehaved, he simply packed it up and returned it to where it came from.